The idea that some cockamamie right-wing state legislature has butt into that at this incredibly devastating and difficult time, and suddenly you're on your own and you can't trust your doctors because they've told you there are things we can't tell you because it would be illegal. I mean, that is to me like a scene from a horror movie.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. It's Minnie Tamaraju with Reproductive Freedom for All for our latest podcast episode of My Body, My Pod, a Reproductive Freedom podcast. And I'm so thrilled today to be joined by a true champion for reproductive freedom, but also one of the most significant leaders in the fight for court reform. And we're going to really unpack, what happened in the Dobbs decision, how we got here. And believe it or not, there is a pathway out, and our guest is going to outline that and, give us some scoop. So with that, I'm really excited to welcome you, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse.
Thank you, Minnie. Great to be with you.
Thank you for being with us.
Of course.
So the first question my team wanted me to ask you is, why should you be on an abortion rights podcast?
Because the choice for women to make is a pretty fundamental liberty. It was actually seen as a fundamental constitutional liberty by the Supreme Court for a long time. And what we saw is a very deliberate, calculated plan executed to capture the court and turn it into a vehicle for certain right-wing values, certain right-wing desires that they couldn't accomplish through democratic means. So if you care about the integrity of government and about the integrity of the court, to watch it captured that way is really frustrating. And then, of course, when you see how Dobbs plays out in the lives of just like regular people, it's pretty damning what it means. And when you think about, for instance, like a woman and her husband are in the hospital,
Right.
and they've got the room painted at home. They've got names for the baby. They are hoping that this is going to be a joyful occasion. And then things start to go wrong medically in really alarming ways. And suddenly a whole new set of choices have to present themselves. And instead of having doctors who they can rely on, who are their allies in all of this, suddenly they're on their own because the doctors have to say, wait a minute, I can't even talk to you about some of your options because of what the state legislature said.
Right.
And now, in this moment of family crisis, they've got to start thinking about, like, why is the state legislature in this room at all now?
Right.
I need the best medical advice I can get.
But those doctors are also talking to lawyers. And those lawyers are advising those doctors what they need to do to avoid being back in court. So it does kind of all come back to our
What's
legal
up in court,
system,
yeah.
right? So you said a phrase that I want to make sure we break down. And you said captured the court.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And that relates to how did we get here?
So if you go back and look at American history, you see a doctrine or a practice called agency capture. And it goes back to the early days when the robber barons, who made millions and millions in mining, made sure that the mine safety board was controlled by their friends and would let them do what they want.
If you're watching The Gilded Age, do you watch The Gilded Age?
I don't.
If you're watching The Gilded Age, there's a whole robber baron mining storyline.
Yeah.
So
or if
just
it was
to
railroads,
make it a little more contemporary.
Yeah. Or if it was railroads, they'd set
Right.
it up so that the Railroad Commission set the rates that they wanted. So they were captured agencies, captured regulators. And there's a whole book of policy and of history about agency capture or regulatory capture in administrative law and in economics. And so that's been around a long time.
Right.
The novelty here was the corrupt right-wing billionaires deciding that they should do the same thing, but with a court, with the Supreme Court, indeed.
So in layman's terms, this is, special interests taking, getting involved in the process of who gets to regulate them.
Correct.
Through exertion of influence through money.
Correct.
Right. So one of my follow-ups is going to be about dark money, and I think that's connected, and I can jump to it right now.
Yeah.
So there's a concept called dark money, and what does that mean?
Dark money means basically large amounts of money spent in politics or to influence political races without the public being able to know who is behind the expenditure, and therefore unable to evaluate what the motives are of whoever's behind the expenditure, and therefore unable to judge whether they're just being like lied to by somebody who's got a huge special interest here, or whether this is actually the sincere view of whatever the phony front group is.
And we've seen a lot of phony front groups in this process of whittling away and destroying reproductive freedom in this country.
Yep.
Going back to court capture, and let's talk about how we got to Dobbs. I worked on 2016 for Hillary Clinton's campaign, and we knew if we lost that race, we were out there saying it, she was out there saying it, that this could be the beginning of the end for Roe.
Yeah.
Because this has been a long project.
Yeah.
This is not an overnight process.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about what happened and how we got here with the makeup of the court and the court capture?
Well, you have to go all the way back to a memo written by Justice Lewis Powell before he was appointed to the Supreme Court by President Nixon, just months before, which said to corporate interests, if you want to regain control over democracy in America, you've got to make sure that you can control the courts, because they're essential for getting what you want done. And so off of that, the right wing began to build a coalition led by big corporate interests and big polluters, but also drawing in the anti-abortion movement, drawing in whoever they could
in their broader coalition
to pull together a coalition. And then with that coalition, they started to pick who could be on the Supreme Court, and then made sure that the only people who got on the Supreme Court were ones who were reliable votes for the special interests that were controlling the nomination process.
And how can they do that? How could they do that? Again, it goes back to dark money.
Yeah, well, two things. First of all, I think for a long time they did it just out of frustration.
Right.
They saw this as the only avenue that they had, because when they tried to get Congress to do crazy stuff, Congress would say, no, we're not going to do that. Even Republicans would say, no, we're not going to do that.
Because they didn't have the majority of Americans.
Correct.
They didn't have public
They would have
opinion on their
crashed
side.
into really hostile public opinion, so they wouldn't do it.
Back then.
The Supreme Court doesn't have to care so much about public opinion, so you go there and you get things done that even Republican senators and congressmen wouldn't vote for, because you have pre-screened and hand-selected your Supreme Court nominees so that they will do what you want. And that screening process was very carefully developed over a long time. And then what happened is that Citizens United was decided.
So important. So that just changed everything.
Changed everything. Suddenly unlimited money was okay in politics. And the Supreme Court saw to it that that unlimited money, you could hide who was giving it. It would come through phony front groups with, anodyne names like, People for Puppies and Prosperity, nonsense stuff. But the money was there.
Right.
And the money allowed big special interests to go, say, to Mitch McConnell and say, look, all of your senators need to vote to block Merrick Garland. All of your senators need to vote to clear Brett Kavanaugh, even though he has these unresolved allegations of assault. You need to do this. And he could say to them, yeah, we do need to do this, because it's the difference between getting $1 billion in campaign money or getting stiffed by our angry big donors because we didn't deliver for them.
So there was the pre-Citizens United era where this very organized network was, creating entities that were mentoring and supporting like law students, professors. Yeah. When I was in law school, I was a terrible law student, but when I was in law school in the 90s, there was the Federalist Society, and we knew that, they were all sort of being coached and mentored and funded, and they had scholarships and they had special trips and they were being facilitated, yeah. Right? But that was more soft power. And then you have EC and Citizens United, and then it's like the floodgates just open, and it's like out and out, like what we used to consider corruption.
Yeah. Before Citizens United, you had things like Leonard Leo, the
Yes, let's talk about Leonard
creepy
Leo.
billionaire's fixer who was behind a lot of the Supreme Court mischief, killing off the nomination of Harriet Miers,
I remember
who
that.
was supported by President Bush. She was his legal counsel, fellow Texan, personal friend, and he moved to put her on the Supreme Court, and she got taken out, basically, not by Democrats, by the far right, which said, like, no, she can't be trusted on our issues. She's not hard right enough.
She's not ideologically pure.
And so they forced Bush, under intense pressure, to humiliate himself by withdrawing his own nomination. And guess who was the person who filled the gap? Sam Alito of Dobbs.
Right.
And
The
that was
architect.
before the big money came in. The big money came in, and that allowed them to put the kind of pressure onto Republican senators so that they all stand up, salute, and vote for whoever comes out of the right-wing billionaire-influenced process.
So how do you go from Leonard Leo to Dobbs? What's the through line?
The through line is that he was helping this little group of creepy right-wing billionaires select Supreme Court nominees.
And knock out ones that might be moderate.
And knock out ones that would not vote their way.
Including
And
on
they had
abortion rights.
Including on abortion rights. I think the primary pressure for all of this was, to have big polluters be able to pollute and have the financial community be able to cheat
Be
people.
unfettered.
Be unfettered. So I think the core was a corporatist, no accountability model, but they did want to make this work through a coalition, and they
made a deal.
Yeah, they made a deal,
And
and it wasn't
there
too
are
hard
enough
to get.
anti-abortion creepy billionaires in this cabal that this issue continues to be relevant. They're not dropping this. They're not leaving it to the states. They're not stopping. They're still trying to stack the courts right now with anti-abortion extremists.
Yeah. And if you're a creepy billionaire who wants to pollute for free, for instance,
Right.
you may have completely different views about abortion. But if you've got a mechanism set up
Right.
that is going to screen everybody for all of these issues, and you get yours, you get that the EPA is always going to be hobbled by the Supreme Court. You get that the Clean Power Plan is going to be called unconstitutional. You get that they're going to attack pollution regulation and pollution regulators. You'll go along with whatever the abortion lane is of that clearance process because you're getting what you want. So you don't have to be an anti-abortion creepy right-wing billionaire to be a part of the scheme as long as you're getting what you want. And of course, the anti-choice movement gets what it wants, and so they all
No matter
line up
what.
together.
Look, I mean, they don't really care about us is the bottom line. They're being driven by something else. What are they being driven by?
They're being driven by a lot of money.
Like, how much are we talking about?
Well, let's just say that the International Monetary Fund has calculated that the subsidy for fossil fuel in the United States every year from being allowed to pollute for free runs around $700 billion.
Wow.
So if you're the fossil fuel industry and you're asked to put $1 billion into this, that makes your interference in the court the most lucrative part of the entire fossil fuel industry. The payback is so
It's
huge.
a great ROI,
Huge ROI.
right? How much are they investing in the capture of the court versus what they're getting back?
Yeah.
And
1,000 to
so
1.
all the Americans who've lost their bodily autonomy, we're just collateral damage.
Rolled over by this giant
They could care less.
machine. They could not.
They don't even have the nerve to care about it. They're like, we made a deal with this coalition
Yep.
of lunatics, and we don't care anymore.
We're getting what we want, and we got our deal, and so that's where we are. And the actual numbers from people who've looked at this run to about $500 to $600 million that we can trackers have found were spent. But of course, that
Because of ECU and because of dark money, we can't really track all of it.
you don't know all of it. You don't know all of it. And the really scary thing about dark money is that you don't have to spend it for it to be dangerous and effective. Once politicians know that you've got the power to drop $1 billion dark money expenditure into their race, all you have to be able to do is say to the campaign manager and say, make sure your candidate lines up with us, or you will see us crush you in the primary with all of this money. And then the campaign manager goes to the candidate and says, if you want to win this thing, here's the position you have to have. And the candidate obediently signs up, and it leaves no trail for the public to see that that level of influence was brought to bear to fix a candidate.
When I took it, it's astounding. When I took this job just about 4 years ago, and I was getting briefed by my team, and they were like, the latest stats on how many Americans support abortion rights. 8 out of 10, all the stuff we saw actually pre-Dobbs, but was proven post-Dobbs and all of these ballot measures. We knew this was coming. And I said, well, if this is the case, why do we keep losing so many fights? But this is a core part of the answer. When I'm out in the States, I was just in New Jersey campaigning with Mikey Sherrill, when folks are like, we're the majority. Yeah. We're the majority on the environment. We're the majority on abortion rights. We're the majority on gun violence.
Safety, yeah.
What is happening? This is what's happening.
This is what's happening. Secret money in the billions of dollars has completely contorted the American democratic system.
So let's talk about what we can do about it. You are, the leader in the Senate on all of these issues regarding the courts. What are the things you're championing? What have Senate Democrats been doing? I know quite a bit. But explain to our audience, and how can they be involved and how can they help?
Yeah. Well, I think the number one thing is to get rid of dark money, which we can do by simply passing a law. And the one that I support, that I've been arguing for, is pretty simple. It says if you're spending more than $10,000 in a particular race, you have to give full disclosure of who you are. And you can't hide behind a whole, Russian nesting doll series of phony front groups. You have to really fess up that it is you, so that the public, the citizens, people who are voting, know what your motives are. And the Supreme Court left that wide open in Citizens United. It's just that dark money has blockaded that from happening in the Senate. But the public is hugely behind this, sort of, 80+% numbers to be rid of dark money. So leaning into the organizations that support getting rid of dark money is very, very helpful to do. Over at the court, they need to have a proper ethics code, like essentially every other person in government has to follow. And
well, unless you're the president.
They need term limits. Yeah, the president's a unique case right now.
Yeah. So can you talk, so you're saying we don't have the votes to pass your bill? We're not.
We have the votes as soon as we have Democratic majorities. But when these votes come up, every single Republican votes to defend dark money. Every single Democrat votes to get rid of dark money. And there we are.
And we're not that close to having Democratic majorities, although we're going to fight like hell next year.
Yeah. I think we're trending towards a House Democratic majority, and we're fighting very hard to get a Senate Democratic majority.
All of the very forces, the dark money forces behind what's happened with the courts, are actively behind trying to rig the system by stealing seats in states across the country, because they know we're on the path to winning these majorities. Yeah. So we're seeing sort of a new phase of this hyperdrive of dark money. Yeah. And actually not even that dark.
Gerrymandering is an explosive thing right now that is being driven by Trump, but it's also being driven by an enormous amount of money available to legislators and to Republican governors to drive this stuff through. If you look around, people are pretty concerned about the economy right now. They're concerned about their cost of living. And here you have state legislatures that, instead of addressing cost of living problems, are doing something that is wildly unpopular and entirely partisan and political. And so there's some natural blowback to that, and yet they're doing it anyway. So when they're doing it anyway, that's a tell.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and then I'm going to come back to this, because we were talking earlier before we started recording about the shutdown that we're in right now. And you just said when they're doing things that are unpopular and they're doing it anyway, that's a tell. Yeah. Well, that's what's happening with this shutdown. right? It's wildly unpopular. What we're fighting for, healthcare, is incredibly popular, and they're not even trying to talk to you.
Not yet.
What do you make of this?
Well, first, they're moving in the right direction. When this started and we said, no, you can't have our votes while you're threatening Americans' health care, they said, well, tough bounce. We don't care what you think. Go away. And then when that didn't work, they said, well, what they really want, these Democrats, is to give free health care to illegals. And that blew up in their face as a false fact. So then they finally are now saying, okay, we get it. We do need to extend the Affordable Care Credits. We just don't want to do it while you have any leverage. But we promise, we're like super sincere that we're going to sincerely negotiate with you as soon as
once
the
you open the
shutdown
government
is over and you open the government. So
it's
really,
like Lucy in the football.
and it means that their shutdown of the government, their refusal to negotiate, is now over when they negotiate with Democrats to protect affordable care credits that they've admitted need to be protected. When they negotiate, to me, is not a credible basis to shut down the United States government. So there's that. The other thing I think that they see is that there's all this big money, dark money, creepy right-wing billionaire stuff. They don't like the Affordable Care Credits, but behind the Affordable Care Credits comes a $500 billion cut to Medicare that is even more unpopular. And behind that comes a $1 trillion cut to Medicaid, which is super unpopular. Nobody likes that stuff except weird right-wing billionaire types.
Even corporate entities can't love that, right?
No.
I mean, there's a whole industry, the whole healthcare ecosystem, which is a business in this country, is built on, to some extent, Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
And the Affordable Care Act now. So is that, you think, what's going to help save us out of this or get us out of this crisis?
I think that the continued pressure, as voters begin to understand that it's not just affordable care credits that are at risk right now, that's the immediate thing. But the Republican Beautiful for Billionaires bill actually baked in a $500 billion cut to Medicare by virtue of how much it added to the debt. And it straight up cut $1 trillion out of Medicaid.
Right.
So you have affordable care credits, $500 billion in Medicare, full $1 trillion in Medicaid, all stacked up coming at us. And the more the public knows about what's coming at us, the more they appreciate that Democrats are standing in the breach to prevent that healthcare disaster from falling on their heads. And the more difficult it becomes for Republicans to defend their position. They won't even admit that they cut $500 billion out of Medicare. They did, but they won't admit it.
So how are you, when you're back in your district, when you're back in your home state, how are you talking to folks about this? Are folks coming up to you? Do you feel like voters are paying attention?
Well, the notices have just started going out. So people who are enjoying the affordable care credits, which tend to be small business owners, people who like own their own truck and drive for a living, people who don't have access to a big corporate plan, but also are doing well enough that they're not eligible for Medicaid. That's a population that is getting hit really hard. It's like 40,000 people in my small
And they're about to get
state.
noticed.
And they're getting the notices now of how big these increases are. Hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month in increase hitting their family budgets. So that gets very real very quickly right around now.
And, on the Medicaid side, in addition to cuts to prenatal care, postpartum care, Medicaid births, 40% of all births in this country are on Medicaid.
Yeah.
Wild. You also have the Planned Parenthood defund that went into effect on October 1st, and clinics are shutting down across the country, including in blue states.
Yeah.
So, we're hearing a lot from folks who are finally kind of connecting the dots. And, what we're encouraging our members is to reach out to their members of Congress and say, hey, this is happening to us right now. What the heck are you doing about it? But we really need them talking to your Republican colleagues because the Democrats are doing something about it right now. You're standing in the gap and you're holding Republicans' feet to the fire. What other indication do you have that they're going to actually start talking to you to work this out? Well,
the Republican Medicaid trick here was to push most of the actual Medicaid cuts that an individual would experience until after the November election. What they didn't
November
take
election of next year.
Correct. What they didn't consider adequately is that if you're going to take $500 billion out of Medicaid, and you're going to take $1 trillion out of Medicare, and $1 trillion out of Medicaid, hospitals,
Oh yeah, they're going to start working.
nursing homes,
They're going to adjust to it now.
clinics,
They're not waiting for next
doctors'
year.
practices, they need to prepare for that
Correct.
financial eventuality.
Correct.
And so there's a leading edge that comes from the institutions that deliver you your health care that have to be honest with everybody, their customers, their investors, if it's a private hospital, their boards of directors. And those plans are going to be real before the election. You're going to see the clinics shutting down. You're going to see the doctors' practices having to give up services. You're going to see hospitals having to look at receivership or reduce costs. It's going to be really, really ugly, because when you take that kind of money out of an already fragile healthcare system, you have to expect that it will do real damage. And a lot of that damage is going to hit in red states.
So red states are going to get hit the hardest. The constituents of your Republican colleagues are going to get hit the hardest. Your colleagues aren't stupid. So why? Why are they doing this?
I think at this point, this is a party that is so terrified of Trump and the gang of thugs that surrounds him that it's really hard for them to do any independent thinking. You're seeing little bits of it. You saw a dozen or more House members say, hey, we've got to fix the Affordable Care Credit problem. You're seeing individual senators saying, hey, this Affordable Care Credit problem is real, we should fix it. But they're all waiting for Trump to say, you may go forward and negotiate. And until then, they're just stalled. That's part of the problem of having an autocratic form of government begin to emerge. The whole GOP, the grand old party, is now completely subservient to this one man's whims, and his whims have not yet moved towards solving this terribly immediate problem for, frankly, a lot of people who voted for him.
You just said something I want to just double click on. You said the emerging autocratic government. And this ties back to the courts.
Yep.
Because we've seen folks in civil society on our side, take this administration to court about the federal layoffs, the workforce effects of the workforce, around, executive powers in general. And we've seen some of those cases win. And yet we have an executive branch that's not following them, or that is challenging them, or just flat out disregarding them. So can you explain what you mean by the emergence of an autocratic regime?
Well,
like in plain terms.
In plain terms, it is
because that sounds like crazy, like science fiction to some folks.
It's a chief executive who doesn't respect the basic ground rules of American democracy, who doesn't respect that Congress has the power of the purse, who doesn't respect that he's accountable to the American public with respect to ethics mischief that he's up to, that he's accountable to the courts, and that when courts rule against him, the proper thing is to obey that order and appeal it if you disagree with it, but not to insult and disparage and threaten the federal judges so that they have to get personal security because they had the temerity to rule against an illegal Trump policy. So you see all those pressures on what we think of as the American democratic political system. And those pressures include a lot of pressure on courts. Now, the good news,
yes,
the lower courts are holding up really well.
And in part, your colleagues and friends in the Biden administration, you confirmed a record number of Democrats, Democratic nominees to the courts, including the lower courts.
But now it's not just Biden nominees or Clinton nominees or Obama nominees. It's Trump nominees
and Bush
1 and 2 nominees. It's across the board with legit federal judges saying this is not legal. And very often they go on and saying, and by the way, your arguments don't even make sense. And the facts that you're alleging to me don't seem to even be true. So there's a whole extra layer of skepticism and scorn about the Department of Justice and the government lawyers that did not exist before. So that's all been going quite well. The problem is that goes up to the Supreme Court, and then using this shadow docket where they don't have to write a proper decision, they chuck out the work of the judges below them and let the Trump administration run during a window until they finally get around to writing a full and proper decision.
Which is, I think, what leaves so many Americans discouraged. I mean, look, folks are paying attention. We saw this in the No Kings protests.
Yep.
Folks understand that this is not normal. This is not the behavior of a democratically elected president. It's the behavior of a wannabe monarch. Folks understand it on some level. I think they feel, what can you do if you have a president who does not follow the law? And what can courts do to enforce it?
Yeah.
How can we make him follow the law?
Yeah. Well, I think the key thing is going to be voter pressure next November. And I think for voters to understand that they thought that Trump was going to be there to help them. They thought that Trump was going to lower their costs on day one, as he said. And in fact, all of their costs are going up, and enormous amounts of corruption that are benefiting Trump and his circle and his fellow billionaires. We're basically looting the United States government for the benefit of people who already have more than they could spend in their lifetimes. And regular voters are getting screwed in that contest between them and the billionaires. And so they've got redress at the polls. Yeah. And if people are angry enough, it'll make a huge difference. And particularly if the House becomes Democratic and they have the ability to investigate the corruption and the mischief within the Trump administration. In the Senate, our subpoenas have to go to the floor and can be filibustered, which we saw when we tried. In the House, they don't have that restriction. A simple House majority can issue a subpoena and can dig in and investigate corruption.
As we saw around the January 6th investigation.
Which was a very well done investigation.
And really shed a lot of light and did a lot of public service by educating the American people about what really happened.
Yeah.
So if you had like 3 things you would tell our membership, our 4 million members, to do between now and next November, I'm just bringing you the number 3.
Yeah.
You can give me 5. You can give me 2. Just made that up.
Yeah.
To do something about dark money, the crisis with the courts, the rise of autocracy.
Yeah.
What would be a few tangible things that they can take away and do?
I think what I recommend to people that they do is that they go to their phone and go through their contacts and find, I'm a senator, so I focus on the Senate side. You could do this for House people too.
Right.
Find people you know and care about, who care about you, who live in states with a Republican senator, and tell them to make a call as a constituent to their senator. Because I can tell you that a Republican senator doesn't care much for a call that comes from a Democratic state. Just not a thing. But if it's coming from their constituents, it matters. The second thing is join up. Even if you're despairing of the situation, you will feel better around other people who share your values and share your sense of purpose. So join your organization, join End Citizens United, join Planned Parenthood, join whatever it is.
Right.
And I think that is really important. And the third thing that I tell people to do is to look out for personal stories that will stick and share them on social media. Now, there may be 1,000 stories that get out there and that don't stick at all, but every once in a while, one personal story really sticks. The story that we developed in the Budget Committee of the woman who had to flee the state of Texas and stand frightened in the line at the airport in Texas to get the health care that her complicated pregnancy needed in Colorado. That's an unforgettable story. And she went on to get a lot of attention for that. And that kind of reframed the question. So there are moments when you can tell a story that sticks. One person stood in front of a tank in Tiananmen Square.
Right.
One other person took the picture. Those 2 people kind of changed the world. So look for those moments where something real, something really personal, something that sticks with people is something that you can share.
Well, I promise I did not bribe you to say that. Speaking of dark money, we have a partnership with an organization called Abortion in America, which was founded by my mentor, the late Cecile Richards.
Oh, yeah.
Is continuing to do some really high quality content around the hundreds of Americans who've been affected by abortion bans. So one of the things we're doing with this podcast is we're airing some of that content and we're asking our members to share it. So we are doing that. We're doing digital organizing. We have digital tools where folks can, look at their friends, look at folks in their phones, see where they live, match them to the voter file, reach out to them on things to do. And we're using all of those tools right now in the elections happening in the next week in Virginia, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, and in California. So, and look, right now, optimistically, having just gotten back from New Jersey, it's looking good. I think people are beginning to pay attention and turn out.
They know that their costs are going up. They know that the promise on reducing costs has been broken. And they know that the rights and liberties that they thought belonged to them are being stripped away by this Trump administration. And as you've pointed out over and over again, the American public is supportive of these things.
Yeah.
And it's just a small
Republicans
group.
and independents support abortion rights.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. So democracy is being essentially overruled by dark money on issue after issue after issue, and people need to reclaim their democracy.
So we've covered a lot of ground. My team tells me in a short period of time. I'm going to zoom out and ask you, because you're frankly, I think, one of our foremost thinkers in the Democratic space about the big picture.
Yeah.
Zoom out. Are we going to have fair elections? You're talking about voters. And a lot of my folks will say, okay, well, I'm doing all these things. I'm voting, I'm sharing stories, I'm, canvassing right now. But are we even going to have a fair shot? Are we going to have fair elections in 26 and 28?
I think we will if we fight for it.
What does that mean?
If that means going into these elections knowing that there are people in the Trump administration plotting to mess around with the elections. I think that...
Yeah, there's been a lot of coverage lately about all the different little elements in the admin messing around or making plans to mess around.
Yes, I think there's a lot of planning going on, and even things like sending ICE and the National Guard into cities to have a big presence is an effort to familiarize, even beyond intimidating, familiarize America, familiarize TV cameras with the visual of agents and soldiers policing American cities. And when that's a familiar thing, it becomes much easier to deploy that on election day.
That's terrifying.
So being an alert citizen and being prepared to push back, not just on election day by showing up to vote, but all the way along by making sure that you are alert to and communicating the ways in which this effort to meddle in elections is being developed. I think that really matters. I think we'll succeed because people don't want elections to be overturned by sneaky methods and by having troops, probably illegally, deployed into voting districts that they're worried about. But you got to be alert to it. If we're all sleepwalking through it, then they're way more likely to get away with it.
Right now, my favorite genre of TikTok videos. Are you on TikTok, Senator?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my favorite is, and I need to follow you, so that's my bad. My favorite genre is folks who seem like just regular white ladies going about their business, getting into the face of ICE agents and just screaming their heads off. I hate to be blunt, but cursing them out, get out of my neighborhood, get the hell out. I'm like, that's sort of what we need every American response to be to these folks in your communities who just should not be there, intimidating your friends, your neighbors, your family members.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives me a lot of hope.
For National Guard folks.
Yeah, you can't do that.
They weren't trained for this. They're suddenly being sent places, and I mean, you still see them around Washington. They're just kind of standing around talking to each other because they aren't law enforcement folks. They're not allowed to be law enforcement folks. Sometimes they'll go and rake leaves and clean something up and be helpful that way. But to go and be, hostile to them, I don't think is helpful.
Yeah, you're right. I think there's a little bit of a difference between the undercover ICE
in masks, in unmarked vans, grabbing people off the streets.
And physically intimidating folks who try to document, record, and stand up for their friends and family and their neighbors. And these young kids who've been deployed and are just kind of, I was at the wharf a couple of weeks ago, and they were just kind of standing there with nothing to do. And all the tourists were there, drinking cocktails, having a good time. And these poor kids are out there, but they're in their full fatigue and they have weapons. Yeah. Which is
And it's not their fault that they've been told to do that. It's the president's responsibility that he has chosen to deploy them this way rather than into, for instance, places that are still suffering from climate damage.
Yeah. So I hear you. I haven't seen a lot of videos of folks going after the National Guard.
Exactly.
So that is not necessary. Yes. So my favorite genre is...
I just don't want to be encouraging people to go and be hostile to our guardsmen
I hear you.
and women.
But I hear you. Because, look, I mean, we have a chance to maybe persuade some Americans, right? We also have to remember our audience. It's not all just us. It's also maybe independent voters and Republicans who also don't like the exploitation of the military for political use. Yeah. And we don't want to alienate them either.
It's a fairly basic constitutional principle that the military aren't supposed to be used at home. There was a huge fight in the Federalist Papers about all of that, and not allowing them to take over people's homes, not allowing them to be participating in searches, not posse comitatus law so that they can't enforce the law. There's a whole long bipartisan, conservative, liberal, doesn't matter tradition that the military is to defend us from overseas threats, not to domestic. Be used by one party to attack another.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other podcast. But I mean, I was thinking about your comments about not sleepwalking through this. We have to find ways to shed appropriate energy and outrage while also, navigating a very sensitive topic for a lot of Americans. Yeah. Can I ask you about, I'm going to pivot. Can I ask you about the hearing you had recently with Attorney General Pam Bondi? Yeah. It went viral. You were on SNL. What did you think of your SNL cameo and the young man who played you? Well,
it's always a relief when you're a prop in the joke and not the butt of the joke. So that was a relief. One of the interesting things about that is I think I've been approached by 5 Republican colleagues. Yeah. All to say to me privately. Yeah. That was really disgraceful. You should be able to get questions. Your questions were perfectly reasonable. Right. That's just not the way we should be behaving.
You weren't intentionally giving her gotcha questions.
Yeah, no, they were real simple fact questions that we're entitled to know. But the same Republicans who are saying that was a disgrace, I was ashamed, we should have like bipartisan pushback on all of that. Did you hear a peep publicly from anybody?
No.
Not a peep. So again, there's a intimidation of Republicans by Trump that Senator Murkowski of Alaska has been quite candid about. She's been the one to call out the atmosphere of fear and intimidation that they've created primarily to enforce party discipline among their Republicans so that they will put through whomever they throw up as a potential judicial nominee. Somebody as really ethically challenged as Emil Bovee, who is essentially a Trump thug, got escorted by the Republican Senate onto a seat on the United States Court of Appeals.
Terrifying. So for folks who didn't watch that hearing, what the hell is going on at the Department of Justice? And what were you trying to get Pam Bondi to explain?
Well, part of the problem, and it's not just at the Department of Justice. I'm also the ranking member on the Environment and Public Works Committee, so I have to oversee EPA as well.
Wow.
And what you find is that there are often narratives that the Trump administration wants to propagate that are belied by facts. And they don't want those facts to come out. They don't necessarily want to lie, but they don't want to answer the question truthfully. And if you're stuck and you're in a hearing and you're under oath and you've got a question, if you don't want to lie and you don't want to answer the question truthfully, what do? You put on a drama show for right-wing media.
And Dear
Leader, audience of one. And you perform that way to get through the difficulty you have of not being able to lie, because there'll be accountability for that, and not being able to tell the truth, because there'll be accountability for that too. So there's this performative nonsense that they have to go through, and because it amuses the Dear Leader, it's all fine. The problem is, back to our discussion about judges.
Yes.
Judges see this stuff too. So when the Attorney General of the United States makes false assertions about senators while she's under oath, when the
deliberately misinterprets the law,
when the head of the FBI makes false statements to senators under oath,
I mean, that was a crazy one.
Judges see that too. And that affects their view of the credibility of the Department of Justice and the FBI. So this audience of one business is going to cause, I think, considerable damage to the Trumpsters as it lands more and more and more. And of course, when the judges are also making findings about, that's a preposterous argument, you're not telling me the truth, those facts aren't real, are you in contempt of court right now? You know, those findings, judges read each other's work as well. And so there's a very, very, very upset judiciary that is not used to being lied to and abused and threatened, and is seeing nonstop that from the Trump administration. And I think it's not too long until that really starts to bite back hard.
So we have all of these like signs, that's maybe not the right word, all these indications from like Republican appointed judges, from members of the House who are Republican, from some of your colleagues who are afraid to say something in a hearing but say something to you privately. Like, what's the tipping point for them? What's going to get them to stand up, understanding there's this dark money piece? And what do your fellow Democrats need to do to catalyze that, to get to that point?
Well, at the moment, I think that pressure is really building in healthcare. And as those notices go out and people understand that they're going to have to pay $200, $300, $400, $500, $600 more a month
in an economy that's
already difficult for them, then
in a very terrible job market,
with most of them in red states and many of them in rural jobs where there isn't the kind of corporate policy that covers all employees. You're a farmer, you're a truck driver, you're a whomever, small business owner in a small town. Those are the people at the heart of the Affordable Care Credit. And I think that is building a lot of pressure. And as soon as people figure out about the $500 billion cut to Medicare that starts next year, and then as soon as those early signals into hospitals and doctors' practices and clinics and nursing homes about the Medicaid cuts start to land, you know, real life catches up with false political narratives pretty quickly, and that's what's about to happen.
So you're still optimistic, or maybe that's too strong a word. You still have hope that your colleagues are listening to those signals, that they're feeling the beginning of that, you know, vibration of that potential earthquake. And we just got to be ready, and your colleagues have to be ready to strike.
or at the moment, stand fast.
Stand firm.
As that realization
And you
dawns
feel good.
more and more on them.
Your caucus is going to continue to stand firm.
I think so, because,
Yeah.
I mean, back to where we started, they've
Yeah.
gone from shove it, we're not interested in talking to
Yeah.
you ever, to you're faking it, this is just about the illegals, to, yeah, the Affordable Care Credits are real and important, and we should get around to that someday, to, okay, we'll start negotiating with you on this when the shutdown is over, to, like, we're really serious, we want you to, we promise to be sincere, we're developing our negotiating position right now. So when you see that movement happening on the other side, why would you not predict that it would continue? At the moment, this shutdown exists only over Republicans wanting to negotiate about affordable care credits a week or 2 weeks from now rather than now. It's really worth shutting down the
Which
government
is
of the United States
wild.
over that? That makes no sense. Of course we
And if
hold
they
our
save them
position.
right now, there's like still a narrow window before the notices go out, no? Or is
Most
it
of the
already
notices
too
are
late?
out, but in November you actually have to start making your choices as opposed to just
Right.
getting notices. So this is game day for
And they've already fumbled.
affordable care credits.
Right.
January begins game day for Medicare cuts, and then the Medicaid $1 trillion cut will start to affect healthcare providers in this same window. So there's going to be
Right
a
in
lot
time
of
for
pressure
the
building.
midterms.
Right in time for the midterms, when people are concerned about cost and they're seeing healthcare costs go through the roof.
Okay, well, so that gives us a couple of strategies, plans. We're gonna digest everything and give folks action items and things to do. I want to end by asking you a personal question. You know, you've been such an advocate and champion for reproductive freedom. Do you have any, personal connection to the issue? Any personal story you want to share? Anything from your own journey to being a parent? Why this matters to you so much?
I think the image that haunts me is, as a parent,
Yeah.
of being in that room,
Yeah.
waiting for the happiest occasion in your life, your new baby to arrive, with like all the planning done at home, all of everything ready, and then imagine that something suddenly goes wrong.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's very scary. And when that happens, it means everything to a family
Yeah.
who are basically alone in that room beyond their expertise, with truly life-changing decisions that they're going to have to make, with potentially the mom's life at risk,
Yeah.
potentially the baby's life at risk.
Right.
And in that moment, you find out that your doctors can't talk to you any longer because of things that their state legislature have told them about being held liable for giving you the proper medical advice that you need.
Yeah.
That is just such a scary collapse
Right.
of your support structure that you have every right as an American to rely on. That doctor-patient relationship is very, very precious. And the idea that some cockamamie right-wing state legislature has butt into that at this incredibly devastating and difficult time, and suddenly you're on your own and you can't trust your doctors because they've told you there are things we can't tell you because it would be illegal. I mean, that is to me like a scene from a horror movie. Mm-hmm. And the fact that that is something that these extremists are willing to inflict on American families at that moment, to me, that's unforgivable.
Thank you, Senator, for joining us. I really thank you for all of the time. Thank you for being such an important champion on this issue. And thank you for your clear-eyed commitment to exposing the corruption, the dark money, connecting the dots for us, and helping us navigate this really tricky time as we build our pathway out of this crisis.
I could say the exact same thing to you. Thank you.
It's great to always work with you.
Thank you.